Crestwood Academy was a place where only the best were welcome. Its marble floors gleamed under the bright lights of the hallways, its classrooms were equipped with the latest technology, and its students, dressed in the finest clothes, carried an air of superiority wherever they went. The students here were the future of the world, or so they believed. Every day they passed through the hallways, surrounded by a sense of privilege and entitlement. And there, amidst all this wealth and opulence, was Marcus Jones, the janitor. He was a quiet, unassuming figure, always seen with a mop in hand or a broom slung over his shoulder, sweeping the floors as the students scurried past him. Marcus was never greeted by anyone, never even noticed, except when the occasional student would make a snide comment as they walked by. To them, he was just another invisible employee, a necessary presence to keep the school in pristine condition, but little more than that. The students rarely gave him a second thought. Tyler, a popular student and star of the football team, was one of the biggest offenders. He would often pass Marcus with a smug smile, making sure his friends heard him laugh. "Hey, Marcus, don't work too hard, all right?" he'd say, as if it were a joke, though his words carried more mockery than humor. His friends would chuckle, and Marcus would simply nod silently, continuing his work without a word. To the students, Marcus was just a janitor, a man in faded clothes with calloused hands, forever cleaning the same floors, wiping down the same windows, and emptying the same trash cans day after day. They had no idea that Marcus was far more than what they saw. As the bell rang and the students began filing into their classes, Marcus took a moment to stand still in the hallway. He leaned against the mop bucket, gazing out at the students rushing by. Their laughter, their chatter, their sense of importance, it all felt so distant. He wondered if they even realized how much they took for granted. He wasn't bothered by their indifference. After all, he had been in this position before. But he had something they didn't, something they couldn't even begin to imagine. Marcus was quietly working toward a doctorate in environmental science. He had enrolled in online courses, taken night classes, and spent countless hours reading scientific journals and research papers. But none of this would ever be known to the students at Crestwood Academy. To them, he was nothing more than the janitor, the invisible man behind the scenes. And that was exactly how he wanted it. As the students disappeared into their classrooms, Marcus silently returned to his duties. He had a plan, and it was playing out perfectly. The time would come when they would see him for who he really was. But for now, he would remain a shadow in their eyes, watching, learning, and waiting. It was another busy morning at Crestwood Academy. The students hurried through the hallways, chatting loudly about their plans for the weekend, their upcoming tests, and the latest trends. They barely noticed Marcus as he pushed his cart full of cleaning supplies down the corridor, his broom sweeping the floor in rhythmic strokes. The walls of the school were adorned with shiny trophies, framed accolades, and banners celebrating the achievements of the school's most prestigious students. A few of them, like Tyler and his friends, walked with their heads held high, clearly believing they were the reason the school shone so brightly. Marcus caught snippets of their conversations, loud, arrogant chatter about their family's wealth, college acceptances, and who was dating whom. None of them gave a second thought to the janitor quietly working away at his tasks. Tyler was in the middle of a group of friends when he spotted Marcus mopping the floor in front of him. Tyler stopped, looked at his friends, and grinned mischievously. He leaned in, whispering something to his friends, and they all began to laugh quietly, glancing toward Marcus. "Hey, Marcus!" Tyler called out, his voice carrying through the hallway. "You missed a spot!" His friends burst into laughter as Tyler mockingly pointed to the floor, pretending to inspect it with exaggerated seriousness. Marcus didn't respond. He just continued mopping the floor, his eyes focused on the task at hand. One of Tyler's friends, Samantha, joined in the teasing. "Yeah, you should be more careful. That floor looks like it could use a professional," she added, a smirk on her face. She and her friends laughed as they passed Marcus, not a single one of them offering a smile or an acknowledgement of his presence. To them, Marcus was invisible, just a servant who didn't deserve to be part of their world. Marcus felt the familiar sting of their mockery, but he didn't show it. He never showed it. Instead, he kept his head down and his focus on the task at hand. He had learned long ago that the most powerful response to such behavior was silence. It gave them nothing to latch onto, nothing to feed their ridicule. But it also meant they never knew the truth. That Marcus wasn't just a janitor. He wasn't just someone who cleaned their messes. As Tyler and his friends walked off, still laughing, Marcus paused for a moment. He looked up at the polished floors they walked on, at the pristine hallways they took for granted. He couldn't help but wonder if they ever thought about the people who kept this place running, the people whose names they didn't even bother to learn. It was a moment of quiet reflection for Marcus, but it was also a reminder of why he had taken this job in the first place. He wasn't here to be seen. He wasn't here for recognition. He was here to observe, to learn. The students of Crestwood Academy, in their arrogance and blind confidence, were the perfect case study. They didn't realize it, but Marcus was watching them, learning from them. And one day, when the time was right, everything would change. But for now, he would continue to clean their messes, quietly and without complaint. The students didn't need to know who he really was. They never would, not yet. The days stretched on, and Marcus continued his routine at Crestwood Academy. With each passing day, the students grew more engrossed in their own lives, their own petty dramas, while Marcus remained a constant, unspoken figure in the background. He moved through the hallways like a shadow, always present, always working, but never truly seen. The students barely took notice of him, just as they had before. Yet Marcus had come to understand something that they never would. The janitor's life was one of quiet strength, an unspoken resilience that the students couldn't fathom. They took their privileges for granted, assuming the world would always cater to their desires, while Marcus, in his faded clothes, quietly observed their every move. He could see the way they treated each other, the arrogance with which they carried themselves. Most of them, like Tyler and his friends, never looked beyond their own noses. They were too absorbed in the next social event or the newest gadget to recognize the value in simple things, like humility and respect. But Marcus knew better. He had worked countless hours, often through the night, to earn his place in the world. He had dreams, aspirations that went far beyond cleaning floors and wiping down windows, and though he never spoke of it, those dreams were what kept him going, kept him moving forward even when no one else noticed. One day, as Marcus was pushing his cart down the hallway, he overheard a conversation between two students near the lockers. Samantha and Chloe, both popular and self-assured, were chatting animatedly as they checked their phones. "I can't believe I'm going to be working for my dad's company this summer," Samantha said, her voice dripping with entitlement. "I don't even have to work hard, you know? Just show up, look pretty, and I'll get paid." Chloe laughed, flipping her hair. "That's so true. It's crazy how easy life is when you have money. I bet you could just snap your fingers and have anything you want." Marcus continued his work, his face expressionless as he wiped down a nearby window. He had heard similar conversations countless times, each one more disheartening than the last. The sense of privilege these students carried with them was overwhelming. They believed they were the center of the universe, with everything handed to them on a silver platter. Yet Marcus knew something they didn't. He knew what it meant to work hard, to sacrifice, to earn every bit of what you had. He wasn't just cleaning up after them because it was his job. He was there because he was building something, even if they couldn't see it. They didn't understand the dedication it took to balance working multiple jobs, taking online courses, and studying for his doctorate in environmental science. But Marcus understood the value of quiet perseverance. He wasn't interested in accolades or recognition, at least not yet. A few moments later, Tyler and his friends walked past Marcus, still oblivious to his presence. As they passed, Tyler gave a loud, exaggerated sigh, as if cleaning the school was the most tiresome thing in the world. "Ugh, I don't know how he does it," Tyler muttered. "That guy must be miserable, cleaning up after all of us every day." Marcus glanced at him, his face impassive, and then returned to his work. He didn't need Tyler's recognition. What mattered was that Marcus knew who he was, and that was enough. He had learned the value of inner strength, of perseverance in the face of disregard, and he would continue on his path, quietly teaching lessons the students didn't even know they needed. One day they would understand. But for now, Marcus was content to remain unseen, his strength and intelligence hidden behind the janitor's uniform. He knew the truth would come out eventually, and when it did, it would be a revelation no one would ever forget. As the months passed, something subtle began to shift at Crestwood Academy. The students, wrapped up in their own lives, had not realized it yet, but Marcus had slowly started to earn their respect, though they had no idea why. It started with small moments, unnoticed at first. Samantha, who had once mocked Marcus for his worn-out uniform, began nodding to him in the hallways as she passed. She didn't stop to speak to him, but there was a slight change in her demeanor, a shift in the way she regarded him. Tyler, who had once ridiculed Marcus, started offering him a quick, quiet smile when their paths crossed, though he still acted like he was too important to engage in any meaningful conversation. Marcus didn't let the change in their behavior go to his head. He wasn't here to seek approval. His task was simple: to continue with his work, stay focused, and wait for the right moment to reveal his true identity. Still, the respect was there, and for the first time, it wasn't just because of his position as a janitor. One afternoon, while sweeping the cafeteria floor, Marcus overheard a conversation between two students, Chloe and her friend Emma. They were talking about a charity event they were organizing to raise money for local families in need. As they discussed the details, Chloe mentioned how much they were struggling to find volunteers willing to help. "Honestly, I don't get it," Chloe said. "Why does everyone think their time is too precious to help others? We're all just living in this bubble, acting like the world revolves around us." Emma shrugged. "I guess some people just don't care, but I think we're doing something important. It's about time we gave back." Marcus paused for a moment, leaning against the wall and listening to their words. He didn't say anything, but something inside him stirred. It wasn't just about cleaning floors anymore. He could feel that the students were beginning to see the importance of helping others, of giving back, and while they were still far from understanding the full scope of what it meant to care for the world, their attitudes were changing. Marcus knew that their growing respect for him wasn't just a sign of their awareness of his silent strength. It was a sign that they were beginning to recognize the importance of the things he valued: hard work, humility, and service to others. Later that day, as Marcus finished his cleaning duties, he watched the students move about, still oblivious to his identity. But this time, he felt a quiet sense of pride. Their respect was starting to bloom, even if they didn't know why it was happening. It was a beginning, and that was enough for Marcus. The day of the graduation ceremony had arrived, and the air at Crestwood Academy was filled with excitement and anticipation. Students, dressed in their finest outfits, gathered in the auditorium, chatting excitedly about their accomplishments, future plans, and the next steps in their lives. They were the stars of the day, basking in the spotlight of their hard-earned success. Marcus stood at the back of the room, dressed in his usual janitor's uniform, quietly observing. His hands were tucked behind his back as he carefully monitored the room, ensuring everything was in its place. He could hear the chatter, the laughter, the clinking of heels on the polished floor, but he didn't participate. He wasn't there for the applause. Principal Waverly took to the stage, her voice commanding attention as she began speaking to the students and their families. "Today, we celebrate not only the achievements of our students, but the promise of the future they carry with them. It is with great pride that we honor the accomplishments of those who have dedicated themselves to excellence in all they do." As the ceremony proceeded, Marcus kept his head down, blending into the background. The students, now fully aware of his presence, were still unaware of the profound significance that day would hold for them. He was just another faceless figure, silently tending to the details. They continued to walk past him, hardly sparing him a glance, absorbed in their own worlds. Then unexpectedly, the ceremony took a turn. Before we continue, I would like to take a moment to honor an individual who has demonstrated extraordinary dedication and achievement in a quiet, yet profound way, Principal Waverly announced, her voice breaking through the noise of the room. The crowd quieted. Marcus straightened up, surprised. This person has quietly worked behind the scenes, inspiring us all through their commitment to environmental sustainability, research, and service to our community. It is my honor to present this special award for excellence in environmental studies to none other than Marcus Jones. A stunned silence fell over the room. The students blinked, uncertain, as Marcus slowly stepped forward from the back of the auditorium. His heart raced, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of every student's eyes on him. Tyler, Samantha, Chloe, and the others who had once mocked him were speechless. They exchanged bewildered glances, trying to comprehend what was happening. They had always seen Marcus as nothing more than the janitor, the man they had belittled, the invisible figure they had never thought twice about. But now they were staring at the quiet, unassuming man who had earned one of the most prestigious awards in environmental science. As Marcus approached the stage, Principal Waverly handed him the award. The audience remained silent, waiting for some explanation, some context. But Marcus, ever the humble man, simply nodded and smiled politely. He didn't need to explain himself. His work, his dedication, and his silent strength spoke louder than words ever could. The room was still in shock, but the students couldn't help but feel a new respect for the man who had been in front of them all along. Marcus was no longer just a janitor. He was someone who had quietly changed their world, and the impact of his true identity would be felt long after the ceremony ended. The graduation ceremony had ended, and the students were left in a state of stunned silence. As they spilled out of the auditorium into the warm spring air, the conversation buzzed in hushed tones. "Did you see that? Marcus was a PhD student? In environmental science?" Tyler whispered, still trying to process the shocking revelation. "I can't believe it. All this time he was... what? Doing his research while cleaning up after us?" Samantha added, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I feel terrible." The students clustered together in groups, exchanging glances, some of them clearly uneasy, while others fidgeted uncomfortably. They had all laughed at Marcus, mocked him, and dismissed him as just the janitor who was beneath their notice. But now, everything had changed. The quiet, unassuming man they had underestimated had turned out to be far more than they could ever imagine. Marcus, meanwhile, slipped away from the crowd, retreating into the quiet corner of the campus. His heart was still racing, and his head was spinning from the shock of the reveal. But he was not angry or resentful. The quiet pride he felt was enough. It wasn't about proving a point to anyone. It was about showing the students that the world didn't revolve around their wealth or status. It was about teaching them that character, humility, and dedication mattered more than anything else. Back in the school, though, things began to change. The ripple effect of Marcus's unveiling spread quickly. As the students processed what they had learned, a deep sense of reflection took root. Tyler and his friends, who had once considered themselves untouchable, found themselves thinking about Marcus in a new light. They began to question their actions and words, realizing how wrong they had been to treat someone so poorly without knowing anything about them. Samantha, once the loudest critic, started organizing a charity event, working alongside other students who had also been moved by Marcus's quiet strength. The students, who had never thought to help others before, suddenly found themselves asking how they could give back to their community, how they could make a real difference in the world. There was even a shift in how the students began treating the rest of the school staff, no longer dismissing the cafeteria workers, the maintenance staff, or the others who had once seemed invisible to them. They began to acknowledge the importance of every person at Crestwood Academy, regardless of their role. It wasn't an overnight change, but it was the beginning of something powerful. The students were slowly learning the lessons Marcus had quietly been teaching them all along. They were learning about humility, about respect, and about the strength of character that had been hiding in plain sight all along. As the weeks passed, the students of Crestwood Academy began to change. Their attitudes softened, their compassion grew, and they started to look at the world, and each other, differently. And Marcus, though he remained in the background, could sense the shift. It was a change that had been set in motion by one man's quiet strength, and its ripple effect would echo throughout the halls of Crestwood for years to come. Weeks after the graduation ceremony, the students of Crestwood Academy continued to adjust to the realization about Marcus's true identity. Though it wasn't always obvious, their newfound respect for him quietly began to shift the dynamics of their daily lives. One afternoon, as the school year was drawing to a close, Marcus found himself in the school's courtyard, taking a rare moment to enjoy the sunshine. The courtyard was peaceful, far quieter than the bustling hallways and classrooms. It was his place of solitude, a spot where he could reflect on the whirlwind of the past few weeks. Marcus, though often invisible to the students, could now feel a difference in the air. There was an odd, almost reluctant admiration that followed him. Some students made a conscious effort to greet him in passing, but their interactions were tentative, unsure, as if they didn't quite know how to approach him now. As Marcus sat on a bench, watching the clouds drift lazily by, he heard footsteps approaching. He didn't look up at first, assuming it was just another student passing by, but the footsteps stopped in front of him, and he could sense someone hesitating. "Marcus?" a voice called softly. He looked up to see Chloe standing before him. She was one of the students who had once been indifferent, but now there was something different in her eyes, a sense of quiet curiosity mixed with a touch of guilt. "Yes?" Marcus replied, his tone neutral but polite. He wasn't used to these types of conversations, but he had learned to be gracious. I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Chloe said, her voice tinged with sincerity. She shifted uncomfortably, as if unsure of how to express her feelings. "I didn't realize how wrong I was, treating you like you didn't matter. You did all that work, and we never even gave you a second thought." Marcus smiled faintly, not out of mockery, but out of understanding. "There's no need for apologies. You didn't know me. You didn't see what I was working on," he said simply, looking her in the eye. Chloe nodded, her eyes dropping to the ground for a moment. "I know now," she whispered, "and it's kind of embarrassing. I didn't realize the kind of strength you had until the ceremony. You were always right there, doing what we never even thought twice about, and you were so much more than we gave you credit for. I guess I've learned a lot from you." Marcus let her words sink in. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about the lesson being learned, not just by Chloe, but by all the students who had once been so dismissive of him. "I'm just doing my part," Marcus said softly, his eyes turning back toward the sky. "You're doing your part now, too. We all have a role to play, no matter how big or small it may seem." Chloe seemed to absorb his words, nodding thoughtfully. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Thank you, Marcus. I'm going to try to be a better person, and I'm going to make sure I treat people with the respect they deserve from now on. You've taught me that." Marcus stood slowly, offering her a small, kind smile. "That's all anyone can do, learn and grow." With that, Chloe nodded one last time and walked away, her steps slower than before, as if carrying the weight of a lesson learned. Marcus watched her go, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. The change, though small, was beginning to spread. And though it was just one encounter, it marked a turning point for Chloe, a student who had once been blind to the importance of humility and respect, but who now understood, in the simplest terms, what it meant to truly see others. And Marcus, with his quiet strength, was content, knowing that even if the world still didn't fully know his worth, the students at Crestwood were beginning to. One encounter, one conversation at a time. The final days of the school year were rapidly approaching, and Crestwood Academy's students were slowly starting to settle into a new way of thinking. They had spent the entire year focused on grades, social circles, and the pursuit of success, often neglecting the simple but important lessons Marcus had inadvertently taught them. Now, as summer loomed on the horizon, the ripple effect of Marcus's quiet strength had begun to reach all corners of the school. One afternoon, Marcus was mopping the hallway when he overheard a conversation that caused him to pause. It was Tyler and his friends standing by the lockers, speaking in low voices. almost as if they were hesitant. The same Tyler who had once openly mocked Marcus. The same Tyler who had arrogantly dismissed him without a second thought. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at the graduation," Tyler said, his voice quieter than usual. "I mean, I always thought Marcus was just, well, the janitor. But the guy's a freaking genius. He's got a PhD and none of us even knew. I kind of feel bad now for the way we treated him." "Yeah," another voice chimed in, and Marcus recognized it as Chris, one of Tyler's close friends. "I was pretty awful to him. The way we joked about him cleaning up after us, like he was nothing more than the guy who mopped our floors. I don't know why we thought it was funny." Marcus stood still, his mop stilling in his hands as he listened. He wasn't sure if he should feel anger or satisfaction, but he felt something else. Relief. These students were finally seeing the truth. They were acknowledging the value of something that had always been hidden from them. Humility. Samantha's voice came next. "It's not just about what Marcus knew or didn't know, it's how he carried himself. The way he never complained, never asked for attention. He was just there, doing his job, even when we didn't see him, and I think that's something we all need to learn." Tyler sighed, a long, drawn-out exhale. "Yeah, maybe the whole time we were the ones missing out. We were so focused on ourselves, we never saw the quiet strength in others. Marcus was teaching us without us even realizing it." Marcus's heart swelled. He was proud, but not for the reason they might think. It wasn't about him getting credit. It was about the change in them, the change in how they saw the world. For the first time, the students of Crestwood Academy were beginning to understand the true value of hard work, character, and respect. As the conversation began to wind down, Marcus finished his work in the hallway and quietly moved to the next task. He knew that even though they had just begun to understand, they had taken the first steps towards something better. They were learning the most important lesson of all, that people are more than they appear, and sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who go unnoticed. As he worked, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The truth had been revealed, not through grand gestures or speeches, but through simple, silent action. And now, as the school year came to a close, the students were carrying those lessons with them. Lessons they would remember long after they had left Crestwood Academy behind. As the school year drew to a close, Marcus continued his work at Crestwood Academy, moving through the halls with the same quiet diligence he always had. But now, it felt different. The students' interactions with him had become more respectful, more thoughtful. They no longer passed him by without a second glance. There was a new air of acknowledgement in the way they treated him. Small, subtle changes, but changes nonetheless. It made the work he did feel less like an invisible service and more like a part of the school's heartbeat. One afternoon, after the last bell had rung and the students had poured out of the school, Marcus remained in the hallways a little longer than usual. He had already finished his cleaning duties, but he wasn't quite ready to leave. The emptiness of the hallways echoed around him as he slowly walked down the corridor. He had done this job for years, but today, for some reason, it felt more significant. There was a quiet pride in the work he did now, something he hadn't felt before. As he made his way past the lockers, he noticed a familiar face in the distance. It was Chloe, standing alone near the courtyard doors. She was looking down at the ground, her arms crossed as if lost in thought. When she noticed Marcus approaching, she straightened up, but there was no hesitation in her movements. "Marcus," she called, stepping toward him. He paused, raising an eyebrow. "Chloe, how are you?" She gave him a small, unsure smile. "I'm good. I just wanted to say thank you again. I know I've said it before, but I don't think I've really explained why it meant so much." Marcus nodded, not interrupting. He knew exactly where this conversation was going, and he appreciated that she was trying to express herself. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I just wanted to tell you that you really changed my perspective on a lot of things. I've always been so focused on my own life, on what I want. But after the graduation, after everything we learned, I realized how much I was missing before. You don't just show up, do the work, and disappear. You made us think about who we are and what kind of people we want to be. Marcus felt a wave of gratitude sweep over him. She was starting to get it. She was beginning to understand what it meant to truly respect others, regardless of their position in life. And that, in itself, was a victory. "You're learning, Chloe," he said softly, offering her a reassuring smile. "It's not easy to see what's right in front of us sometimes, but it's important to take a step back and reflect. It's about more than just what we can get. It's about what we can give." She looked at him, her eyes wide with understanding. "I'll never forget what you've taught me, Marcus. It's changed how I see the world. I think we all need to look at each other differently." With a final smile, Marcus nodded and turned to head toward the staff room. The hallways were still empty, but as he walked, he felt a deep sense of peace. The students were carrying with them the lessons he had quietly tried to teach them. He didn't need grand gestures or applause. His work had spoken for itself. As he left the school that day, Marcus glanced up at the bright blue sky above. He knew that his time at Crestwood was nearing its end. Soon he would graduate, and the students who had once overlooked him would carry these lessons with them into the world. And that, he thought, was all that mattered. The sun was setting on the last day of school at Crestwood Academy, and the campus was abuzz with final goodbyes and promises to stay in touch over the summer. The year had been a whirlwind of changes, both for the students and for Marcus. He stood quietly by the entrance, watching as groups of students milled around, laughing, exchanging phone numbers, and heading off in different directions. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment, a quiet satisfaction deep within his chest. The school had been a place of isolation for him when he first started working there. He had kept his head down, doing his job with a sense of duty but little regard for the students he served. But now, everything had changed. The students who had once dismissed him had begun to look at him differently. They had started to recognize the value of hard work, humility, and the quiet strength it took to persevere without seeking recognition. It was the kind of change that could never be undone. As the last of the students walked past him, Marcus noticed Tyler and Chloe standing near the school gates, talking in hushed voices. Tyler spotted Marcus from across the yard and gave him a small, hesitant wave. "Hey, Marcus," Tyler called out, his voice warmer than it had ever been. Marcus gave him a nod, walking over to where the two students stood. Chloe, who had been beside Tyler, gave him a shy smile. "We've been talking about what you taught us this year," Tyler said, his hands in his pockets, "about how we shouldn't judge people based on what we see on the surface, about how everyone has something important to offer, even if we don't always recognize it right away." Marcus looked at the two of them, surprised by their sincerity. He had never expected them to acknowledge the lessons he had tried to teach them so quietly. "We just wanted to thank you," Chloe added softly. "You've changed the way we see the world, Marcus. We'll never forget what you did for us. You made us realize that people are more than what they seem, and we're going to try to be better because of it." For a moment, Marcus was speechless. These were the students who had once mocked him, laughed at him, and thought he was invisible. Now they were standing before him, offering their gratitude. The change in them was palpable, and for Marcus, it was more rewarding than any award could ever be. "You've learned the most important lesson," Marcus said, his voice calm and steady. "It's not about what people think of you or how others see you. It's about how you see the world and how you treat the people in it. Keep that with you always, and you'll be just fine." Tyler and Chloe nodded, their expressions thoughtful. They had learned more in that year than they had realized. Lessons about empathy, respect, and the importance of seeing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their circumstances. As the last students left the school gates, Marcus stood there for a moment longer, watching them go. It wasn't just about the students anymore. It was about the ripple effect he had created, the lessons that would live on in the halls of Crestwood Academy long after the year was over. With a deep breath, Marcus turned to leave. He knew that his time at Crestwood was nearing its end, but the legacy he had left behind would endure, and that was enough for him. The students who had once overlooked him were now walking into the world with a new sense of respect and understanding, a quiet strength they would carry with them always.